Well, hello guys, welcome back. I had a better experience with the All Father last night than I did from that dreadful book. Let me explain. I'm sitting here and I'm listening to the wind. Pennsylvania's windy. We all know that. And usually I'm used to the wind, but lately, like over the last week or so, my nerves have just been absolutely shot. I think it's the kind of good trauma of going from being able to go doodly doo wherever I want to go and having to stay with the Norse gods. I love them to death. They know I love them to death. But I have the attention span of a puppy and I like to roam. So it's been kind of hard, kind of stressful on me. As wonderful as it's been getting to know all the Norse gods again, getting to see them all again. And Odin has a point. I can't be over there seeing this god and seeing a Norse god too. Giving full attention to both. As wonderful as all that's been, I've been a little stressed out. So I've been like a cat, a long-tailed cat in a rocking chair factory. And last night we had high winds, like over 50-mile-per-hour high winds, like this close to a tornado high winds. And I've had tornado go right by my house. And believe me, nobody's a badass at that point in time. You like to think you are. You like to think you're tough. We all like to think we're pretty tough. Until we realize how tiny and insignificant we are. And this was just, the wind was going by, and I'd been through the ball drop and everything, and I was nervous because I'm like, holy shit, this house is over a century old, and it wasn't even meant to be a house. And I go up, and I'm like, well, I will watch stuff upstairs to chill. A little computer time upstairs to chill. I had the computer on for about an hour or so, and I finally had to shut it off. I'm like, I have plans today, and I have to get out and go see my friends, or at least call, make an excuse of why I'm not coming. And so, I was just terrified all night long. And it was just a thing of, I think everything everyone's ever told me about, oh, your roof's gonna fall off and blah, blah, blah. And the roof looks fine as far as I know. But you know how people are. And 1 second before I sneeze in your lovely faces. Okay, sorry about that. Where was it? Okay, but it was scary. It was scary because you could hear the wind getting really high at times. And the old father called me down. He stayed the whole time with me, and he knew I was scared. And I'm apologizing for being scared, even though, like, you can hear that wind moving past. And is that a freight train? Is that a freight train? And you think there were like 800 tornadoes in the dark at night. You don't know. And it's something easy to laugh about. It's like if you remember the coverage of the Alaskan earthquake where those guys were hiding under the desk and they were both terrified and they were both looking up real scared, and the woman was talking to them like, oh, look at you, aren't you cute? It was easy for her to laugh because she wasn't scared. But when you're the scared one under the desk, you're just looking up like, and so it was actually good in a way because as scared as I was, he had my full attention. And we tried to work past stuff. And I said, I know a lot of my fear and anxiety comes from having been raised Catholic and realizing that God never answered me. I thought that God answered me because someone did answer me. And having to finally let go of that fantasy because Odin will, for our own good, come over and take the toy we have and take it out of our hand if it's, no longer good for us. Not that it cares if we carry around toys, but if it's a broken toy that we no longer need, he's like, okay, sweetheart, you have to let go of this. And I know he's my God. And I know he loves me. And he's looking at me like, I'm the one that actually answered you. Why are you so upset? Because, and we get upset, those of us who came from Christianity to come into paganism, because we're leaving the comfort of And I think that's why he had me get that book, to be honest. A warm, fuzzy, loving, all-knowing, all-doing God who loves us and hugs us unconditionally, to a guy that we just kind of look at him and we're not sure. And I love the All Father and I trust him with my life, but at the same time, you know he's kind of grumpy at times, put it politely. He actually doesn't have as worse a temper as Sagan. Sagan has a lot worse temper. But I think too the book was kind of hard for me to read because it was a hodgepodge mess. First he was a god, then he was just a spirit, then he was a very wise human, then he was everything. I know he's a very complex subject and you can't, in all fairness, get through talking about the All Father in one book. But she played everything. First she was talking about him as a spirit, and then just as a archetype, and then as a god, and then as a person. Um, it struck me that if she is working with Odin, he's being incredibly lenient and letting her do whatever she wants and go wherever she wants. Every so often she'd start sounding like a pagan or heathen and start talking about hard lessons, but then she'd be right back into um doing things her way, where most people will be tell you to be very careful to not confuse Odin with the American romantic idea of a shaman, of this guy dressed in, deer pelts and out in the woods with an eagle feather banging on a drum and going, ah, ah, ah. And most pagans will tell you be very careful. He is a trickster, and if that appeals to you, yeah, he'll come at you that way. But I didn't see the blood-covered Odin. I didn't see the Odin that, another Odin's woman will tell you about, and she never called herself an Odin's woman, which was strange. Covered in blood. They can scare the living crap out of you just by existing. You know he exists, he's out there somewhere, and you're cowering, and you're like, I don't know how those meta people on Pinterest do it, but please don't smite me. I swear I've been a good pagan. And that's the All Father I know. I know the one that can actually trigger panic attacks. And he's not doing it to be cruel, but his energy is so intense that when he walks up to me, it's like, holy God, I'm so sorry. And he's just looking at me like, what? What? And it's stuff I know I have to get through. He sent me a very crude dream, not this morning, but yesterday morning. I didn't know how to tell you about. I'm in a store, like a it was either a big hardware store or it was like a box store. But the end point of the store was they had these ladders. You know those ladders they get that they can push around? They're actually like a staircase in stores. I needed to use the potty. And they pushed this staircase up to this bright flaming red outhouse. And this man that I've always thought was Lou, but I'm starting to think is Odin, came and he was just smiling and being charming, and he has short cropped white hair and bright blue eyes. I'm starting to think I don't know if this is Lou, and I think it's the All Father. He led me up the stairs grandly, and there were other men and women there. And they led me up to the outhouse. This is very embarrassing, but this is a dream. And I opened the door, or I'm going to open the door, so first the way's open, but then they had to undo 3 or 4 locks to let me in, because they had locked up this outhouse. And this outhouse is bolted to the wall. And once the door is open, I'm looking at it, I'm like, there's no way my fat ass is getting through this small opening, but I got through. And you have to turn around and do your thing, and I was just like, my fat ass gonna rip this off the wall, but you do what you do in the bathroom, and you sense excitement outside because they're like, this is what you have to do. And I woke up absolutely embarrassed. And Loki was like, well, you have to let the shit out. Like, Loki! He's like, well, being subtle doesn't work with you. If you were led up a grand staircase and everybody clapped because the baby went potty, we figured you'd figure it out. I'm like, okay. So there's a lot of shit I have to let go of. It was endearing. But yeah, I know it probably sounded harsh and unreasonable. I like saw the video first thing this morning. I was like, ooh. But when you work with the All-Father, you become absolutely loyal and very protective. You can be scared of him at times. He does scare me at times. Loki scares me at times. There are times I look at Loki and he's looking at me like, I remember human sacrifices. You look so yummy. And he's just kind of looking at you, but you do have to trust our gods. Any god you work with that's worth working with could snap your neck. It's just, we know it. We know as humans they could kill us. And sometimes I wonder if our old stories don't come from a time when they didn't have as much self-control and oopsies, they killed a few. But, it's something we have to face as adult pagans, that every god probably received human sacrifices in their turn, and they all like them in certain ways. You know, like Freyr said to have like drowning victims, and Odin liked them hanged and everything else. So, yeah. But we have to face that about our gods, and we can't say, oh, our ancestors were stupid barbarians. You know our gods, if they hadn't like human sacrifice, they would have found a way to deal with it. It's just, as human beings, we've evolved to the point where we live now in relative safety. And the idea of there not being enough food this winter is, unless we're extremely poor and we don't have access to a food bank or a pantry or something, is not something we have to face. So it's very hard for us to imagine ever getting to the point where we're starving and there's no fuel and everything else. You know, even if we see our homeless or we fear that for ourselves, we think, well, there's always a shelter or something. They'll be crying their eyes out, but they'll be safe. And we don't think that without compassion, but we think, well, there'll still be something. But for our ancestors, there was nothing. There was no shelter to go to. Your neighbors didn't have endless supplies of food either. There was just so much food, so much fuel, so much shelter, and they needed the gods very much. And when they got afraid and there was no more food and there was no more fuel, then they had to go and make the ultimate sacrifice, and it wasn't done lightly. And if the king was felt to be responsible, sometimes the king went too. But it wasn't done lightly. It wasn't done like, our ancestors weren't peace and light, but they weren't hanging every other person either. It was done as a offering. And people will argue over whether they offered criminals or whether they offered the best they had. It's probably somewhere in the middle and depended on who could be sacrificed and what kind of sacrifice they thought was appropriate. So it's something we have to remember with our gods. I know there are still heathens today that say, oh yeah, they'll still take you. In fact, if you're going to walk with Odin, it's one of the things you have to think of. But I think that goes for any god, no matter how kind and gentle they are, no matter how sweet they are. I think that any god has that capacity. It's just, you have to get to the point of trust. And if you came from a Christian background, that's very hard, because you're going from an all-powerful, all-knowing God that knows everything to gods that every pagan will tell you, oh, they have limited facilities, they can miss stuff, and that can scare you. And that's okay. It's part of growing as a pagan. Now, some people might say our gods don't miss anything. Maybe they don't. But you're going from that, everyone telling you God's always in control, to, oopsie, I missed that. I'm sorry, my bad. And, you know, you get used to it after a while. And you start to take comfort in it after a while. there's something actually more comforting in having a God that doesn't know anything, because at least it doesn't mean he didn't just stand there idly by sipping his coffee while something went wrong. Though God knows if he thought it would teach me something. Um, but yeah, and I think pretty much everything I said applies to Loki too, or to any of our gods. You have to face their dark side, you have to face your dark side, and you have to face, building, trusting, loving a relationship with a God who doesn't have 2,000 years of, oh yeah, I can do everything, press, and I'm always right, and I'm always just, and I'm all love. And sometimes it's hard, but it's a journey worth taking, especially if the pagan gods are like, no, we're not going away. You can try to run away, but we're not. And last night was about dealing with my fear and dealing with the, trust of Odin to protect me. And when you're in a high wind situation like that and you hear the wind screaming and you're afraid the roof is going to go or the whole house is going to go, and you're thinking of every tornado footage you've ever seen, it is a moment you have to have absolute trust. And I think I eventually fell asleep because I was just so exhausted from being scared. But I apologized this morning. He says, that was normal for you to be scared. I don't ask you not to be scared. I just ask you to have trust, as frightened as you are. And I was like, oh. He goes, I don't need you to be some badass who's never afraid of anything and is running out into the storm. Because he asked me last night. He's being very practical. He says, how do you think you could show you trust me? I said, well, running out in the storm would be an option, but that's also a good way to die. Because, once winds get so high, everything that isn't anchored starts to fly around, like garbage cans, outbuildings, like small outbuildings that haven't been moored down, everything like that. It's a good way to die. They tell you to stay inside for a reason. And there were warnings to have your emergency plan in place. And my emergency plan is just pray really hard. And I was thinking, oh, I let go of the insurance because I couldn't afford it. No, I was fine. I was okay. The house made it through okay as far as I can see. Part of my roof is not in my yard so far as I can tell. So, and it was a huge blessing. He said, if you make it through this and your house is okay, are you going to believe I can protect you? So, it was a learning experience, and it's something I have to learn bit by bit. But he's trying to wean me off the idea of protective, loving, all-knowing, all-seeing God and face the world as it really is. I haven't had that idea for a while, but I always had it kind of as an option in the back of my mind to go back to. And he's like, no, come here. The world is a scary place, and that's okay. That's why I tell you in the Havamal, not that he's claiming to have directly wrote it, but when you enter a place, you should look all around to see if your enemies are there waiting to kick your ass for you, because that's something a wise person does. And, it's okay if we get scared. That's why we have the gods to pray to. I know there are people who like to beat their chests and say, we never pray to our gods. We never ask them for help. There wouldn't have been any atheists last night listening to that wind, feeling the house shake, wondering if they heard, freight trains or not. And that's, what a tornado can sound like. That was not anything you would be atheistic through. You would be praying. Even if you totally did not hardcore believe, you would be praying to someone. So, as stressful as it was a blessing to go through. So, if you guys like what you see, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.